Night watch is one of those passage rituals that have to take place, and sometimes there's magic that happens on a night watch. Sometimes it's not magic, but sometimes there is magic. What does that magic look or sound like? Today's podcast might give you a little glimpse at that. Hi, I'm Nico Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley podcast. I'm sharing some details of our last night watch on Passage before we got back to the United States, including a little clip that I took while we were actually sailing. Today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Lunatec, makers of the hydration spray bottle, odor-free dishcloth, and self-cleaning washcloth. Lunatec offers practical gear designed to save water and reduce waste. A water bottle that doubles as garden hose, a dishcloth that doesn't get stinky. Yes, please. Visit lunatecgear.com to learn more. Use code BOATGALLEY to save 10% on everything. Lunatec, innovative gear for your outdoor adventures. I would definitely say that night watch is part of the adventure. And if you're going on passage somewhere on your boat where you're going overnight, generally night watch is who's in charge. It's not like we stop places when we're sailing from place to place and need to be sailing overnight. We don't stop or put the anchor out or slow down or what have you at night. No, we take turns being awake all night. And we tend to do watches. If it's just an overnight passage, we'll do 3-hour watches. If we are going for longer, we like the 4-hour watches because it gives one of us, whoever's off watch, it gives you a much better chunk of sleep. But it doesn't mean that we have to steer. We've got the autopilot going. We can listen to music, listen to podcasts. Sometimes you wind up taking sort of 10-minute naps and setting an alarm for every 10 or 12 minutes and getting up to look around. You're aware, you're the person in charge. If something happens or you need a course change, then you make that course change without waking the other person up. We do have a rule on our boat that if you need to go forward for some reason, you let the other person know, although the noise of the harness going along the jack lines would definitely wake the other person up. But still, night watch is a time for, if it's calm and it's nice, it's time for reflection and some solitary time, which is sort of lovely. Our very last night on passage, when we were coming into Beaufort, North Carolina, after, I guess it was 5 days from our last anchorage in the Bahamas. We had to pause in the Bahamas, a couple places to wait for weather. The weather in terms of fronts coming off of the U.S. East Coast this spring of 2023, has been pretty challenging for trying to get north. And we realized when we were waiting in the British Virgin Islands for a weather window, we were watching what was coming. We had a deadline we needed to be back to the States for. We had given ourselves about 6 weeks to get back to the States, and we knew that if we only could get to Florida, we could at least put the boat in a marina and rent a car and get back up to our second child's college graduation. That was the deadline that we had. But we wound up dropping the hook a couple places in the Bahamas waiting for weather because the fronts were coming off of the States about every 3 or 4 days. And it would take longer to get from the British Virgin Islands back to the States, even if you're on a super fast sailboat. And certainly on our smaller one that takes a little bit longer, there was no way that a 4-day window was going to be long enough to get back to the States. So we poked around the north coast of Puerto Rico and the north coast. We didn't poke around. We sailed past and sailed along, stationing ourselves so that if weather came that would be threatening, we had a place to duck out in the Bahamas. And that proved to be a smart move. The last 5-day stretch going up to Beaufort, North Carolina, we did straight offshore from, I guess, Cat Island. The north end of Cat Island in the Bahamas was our last anchorage. And we left thinking maybe we were going to have to tuck into the Abacos, but we did not. We could keep going. And the last of that 5-day passage going into Beaufort was one we thought we would probably get into Beaufort around 6 or 7 in the morning. My last night watch, as we were coming in, we had about an hour. I was going to come off watch about an hour before we were going to get into Beaufort. And it was a calm. The wind was maybe 10 knots and the seas were flat. I could hear the boat simmering along, wavelets kind of kissing the hull. My night watches tend to be when it's calm and there's not a lot of stuff going on. I have a little routine that I do. I start with doing a couple of French lessons on Babbel. Before we leave someplace, I download a whole bunch of them so I can do this stuff offline. I do the same with podcasts. And after I've done my French lessons, I will settle into a podcast or two. Pausing every 10, 12 minutes, I think I set my alarm for, and I get up and take a really good look around the horizon, check to see that we're on course, check to see that the sails are trimmed right, and snuggle myself back into my corner of the cockpit and continue on with whatever it is that I'm listening to. Sometimes I'm so entranced and intrigued with what I'm seeing and hearing that I don't put anything back on audio-wise. I just stop and I watch and I listen. Oftentimes, if we're lucky, there's phosphorescence, which is like bright little sparkles of twinkles in the water. It's caused by small little organisms that are photosensitive, I guess. But as you're moving, it can look like you're just throwing off this cloud of very cool, streamy, sparkler stuff off the back. We've certainly had night watches and night sails where the phosphorescence has been so thick and so strong that it looks like in the moonlight like you're actually on snow because it's so bright. Another side note about phosphorescence that's kind of amusing: if you have a saltwater flush toilet and you're in an area with phosphorescence, you can sometimes have these sparkles going into your toilet after you flush it. I don't think you have that on land. But this night coming into Beaufort, thinking about the last 6 months and our trip to the Caribbean, thinking about what was upcoming, but really just looking at the boat, peeking my head down below, seeing where Jeremy was tucked in the quarter berth, feeling just content and happy with the world. When the boat's sailing along in this calm and easy manner, it's hard to think about being anywhere but right there. Maybe it's a little bit of the ultimate meditation or slowing down, but just to be immersed in what's happening exactly right then is a true gift to me, particularly of night watches on a small sailboat. I had recorded a fair amount that unfortunately wasn't audible when I listened to it after the night watch and the passage was over. But I did do a clip a little bit later after I recorded the first chunk, and I'm going to share it here. You can hear the boat. Maybe you can hear the wonder in my voice. I certainly felt struck by the awe of the beauty and sheer rightness of everything that was going on. Tucking myself in the corner to maybe not have quite so much wind noise. I've moved over to the port side and off to my port, just above the loom, is the Big Dipper, handle pointing up and away, ready to pour just beautiful whatever onto Beaufort. The moon has risen off of my starboard side. It's off the starboard quarter, and it's less than a half moon, approaching crescent, not quite all the way crescent, but there's enough of it that there's a moonlit path from the moon to the boat. I'm just rocking back and forth. See if I can play some of the wave noise for you. most incredible sail. And as the wind has shifted, we've turned our course further down, hoping to coincide and coordinate so that we get into port just as the wind is dying before a front approaches this afternoon. It's pretty spectacular and magical, this watery world. I hope you get a chance to experience it sometime. Night Watch. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you, whether you've had a night watch to get there or not, but we get to toast the incredible, incredible joy that we have in sharing this unbelievable lifestyle. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love it when you share us with your friends. We love it when you don't forget to subscribe. We love it if you find use or joy or something interesting in it. Leave us a 5-star review. That totally helps other people find us. And if you ever need to get in touch with either one of us, our emails are in the show notes. Have the most spectacular, spectacular week.